If you ever meet a human, consider yourself cursed, the old alien rasped, his voice trembling with the weight of a memory too terrifying to forget. I met one once, and I hope none of you ever do. The cantina buzzed with low conversation and the clink of glasses, but the young aliens gathered around the elder fell silent. Lethrix, an aged Xyronian trader with deep-set golden eyes and scales dulled by time, leaned back into the shadows. His once proud posture was hunched, as if the burden of his tale weighed down his very bones. Around him, a group of curious younglings, some Xynthian, others Dirael, and a few Glaxi. They hung onto his every word, their wide eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and unease. After all, humans were the stuff of legends. Stories of them were whispered in back alleys and dark corners of the galaxy. Warriors, monsters, beings capable of leveling entire civilizations. But those were just stories, weren't they? A young Dirael with iridescent skin leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. But the humans, they disappeared hundreds of cycles ago. They can't still exist, can they? Lethrix's eyes darkened, his lips curling into a grim, tired smile. They do. I know because I met one, and it changed everything I thought I knew about fear. The cantina, despite its low hum of activity, felt eerily still in that moment. The young aliens exchanged glances, some doubtful, others wide-eyed with terror, but all were drawn in, like moths to a flame. Lethrix took a deep breath, as if preparing himself to dive back into the nightmare he'd tried so hard to forget. It was on Jorun's drift, he began, his voice low and deliberate, the words hanging heavy in the smoke-filled air. A remote mining colony, far from the galactic rim, surrounded by dust storms and dead stars. I was there to trade, nothing more. But the moment I set foot on that planet, I could feel something wrong. Lethrix paused, his gaze drifting to the bar, where a cloaked figure sat alone, nursing a drink. The figure's face was hidden in the shadows, but his posture radiated a quiet danger. For a moment, Lethrix seemed to lose himself in the memory, his voice trailing off into a whisper. I saw him that day, walking straight out of the storm, like a ghost. One of the younglings, a bold Xynthian with bright green eyes, scoffed. A ghost? Come on, old man. No one's seen a human in centuries. You're just trying to scare us. Lethrix's eyes snapped to the Xynthian, his expression deadly serious. You think I'm lying, boy? You think I'd make this up? I was there. I saw him with my own eyes. The young Xynthian fell silent, the smugness draining from his face. There was something in Lethrix's tone that told him this was no joke. The humans were legends, the old trader continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But they weren't myths. They were real. They were warriors. They were destroyers. And they vanished. But not all of them. The younglings leaned in, captivated by the elder's words. Even the skeptical Xynthian now looked uneasy. The day I met a human, Lethrix said, his voice trembling slightly, was the day I realized why the galaxy is so afraid of them. Lethrix's mind drifted back to that fateful day on Jorun's drift. The colony had been nearly abandoned, the mining operations long shut down due to dwindling resources and constant electrical storms. Dust swirled in the air like a restless ghost, the sky a permanent shade of gray. He had come for a quick deal, a simple trade, nothing more. But as soon as he'd arrived, he had felt it, the presence, an uneasy tension that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. The colony was too quiet, too still. The miners, those few that were left, kept to themselves, their eyes darting to the horizon with a mix of fear and resignation. And then, in the middle of a raging dust storm, he had seen it, a figure walking toward the colony walls, cloaked in a heavy coat, its face obscured by a hood. The figure moved with deliberate purpose, as if the howling winds and stinging sand meant nothing to it. Lethrix had thought it a mirage at first, a trick of the mind after too many years in space. But as the figure came closer, there was no denying it. The stories were true. Lethrix's voice grew softer, drawing the younglings even closer. He was human. I could feel it. The weight of him, the way he moved. It was like watching a predator, calm, controlled, but ready to strike. One of the young Durile asked, her voice barely a whisper, "What happened next?" Lethrix's eyes darted toward the entrance of the cantina, and he swallowed hard. The Canari came for him. The Canari, the elite enforcers of the Dominion. Ruthless, cold, and efficient. They arrived in force, their black armor gleaming even in the dusty haze of the colony. Lethrix had watched from the shadows as they approached the human, weapons drawn, their voices sharp with command. "We've been hunting you," their leader had said, his voice crackling through his helmet speakers. "You're coming with us." The human had barely moved. He stood there, calm, almost bored. His hand rested on the weapon at his side, but he made no effort to draw it. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything had erupted into chaos. The younglings listened, their hearts pounding as Lethrix recounted the scene. "He moved faster than anything I've ever seen," the old trader said, his voice filled with awe and fear. One moment, the Canari were advancing. The next, he was upon them. His weapon, some kind of old Earth-made blaster, cut through them like nothing. Every shot precise, every move deliberate. He wasn't just fighting them. He was dismantling them. Lethrix's eyes flickered, haunted by the memory. I watched as he tore through their ranks, one by one. The Canari, those unstoppable enforcers of the Dominion, fell like children before him. He didn't miss. He didn't hesitate. The old trader fell silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. And when it was over, he said quietly, he just walked away, like it was nothing. The younglings stared at him in stunned silence. No one spoke. The weight of the story hung heavy in the air, pressing down on them like a physical force. Lethrix took a deep breath, his eyes filled with a sorrow that none of them could understand. "That was the day I met a human," he said softly, "and I've never known peace since. The galaxy forgot about them, but they haven't forgotten us. And if you ever meet one, you'll understand why I pray you never do." As his words hung in the air, the cantina door hissed open once more, and a figure stepped inside. Cloaked in a long, worn coat, his face hidden beneath a hood, he moved with the same deliberate grace that Lethrix had described. The cantina fell into complete silence. Lethrix's heart stopped. It was him, the human,